So
Do it to it.
Ben, good to see you again.
Good to see you as well, man. Great to see you. Sorry, there's going to be a little distraction in the background for a second. All right. Ryan, it's so great to reconnect and really had such a great conversation the first time. So
yeah, I felt some good synergy, so I figured I'd want to chat with you again. We connected on social a while back, and we had our first conversation, but we were just talking a little bit about what it is you do. But we went, I had so many questions that we kind of went through a lot of material pretty quick. I'm ADD, so sometimes I'll be here and then I'll go over there.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, shiny squirrel. What? I totally get it, man. Totally get it. I am the same. But yeah, there's lots. I think what's really interesting about this sort of conversation in space is there are so many different nodes and they all interconnect, but at the same time, they all have their own sort of spheres. And that's kind of how I approach it, where it's like, okay, we can talk about the blockchain part of it. We can talk about the NFT part of it. We can talk about the crypto part of it. We can talk about the storytelling, the brands, like all of these pieces are a part of the conversation. And I think really that's what the Web3 conversation is, right? It's like a lot of different pieces and what is the holistic approach to that? And I think that's the path to the metaverse, so to speak, right? Like, how do we create a holistic approach that connects to humans?
Yeah. Getting into the space, it's like, where do I start? Especially with, just connecting, interviewing with people in the space. It's like, well, where do I start? It's almost like you don't know where to start. You just have conversations. And that's kind of the best way to get inspiration to find out what you're interested in.
100%. It's funny because I got into blockchain because we were looking to do an ICO for a TV series. We were like, okay, we want to do this independently. And we were working with an independent studio at the time. And it was an intellectual property at that studio. And we were like, how do we do this on our own? Like, and fund it, as opposed to doing the old school way of like pre-sales, where with a film, you'll go out and you'll have your actor and you'll go and you'll pre-sell into different territories. And it was this idea of like, well, what if we launched it as an ICO and then connected the dots there and build a transmedia world around that, where you could own this NFT character, you could play in this game, you could be a part of this, AR project we were building. And this was in 2017, 2018. We were a little too far ahead of the time. So,
wow.
Had to put it on the back burner, which honestly was, for me, was the best thing, because what happened was I ended up partnering up with my business partner, Taboo. We had met through our project Masters of the Sun. We met at Comic-Con, and we were like, yo, let's go make cartoons. Let's make stuff. Let's go make cool stuff. And that relationship brought us to developing stuff with Cartoon Network and Gaumont, and ultimately also writing for Marvel. That has just been the coolest thing ever. So,
I was going to say, yeah, I see the Marvel Hulk there in your background.
Oh yeah, this is my whole library here. If you can see,
check that out.
Our books, and yeah, it's a lot of. This is a minor. I shredded this library down. I had like this massive collection where I was like, okay, I'm going to give it all away to, my friends in my Comic Book Sunday community group. But yeah, this is a very small part of that collection. It's funny, my son gave me that book because he was like, Dad, you're writing Spider-Man. And when this is actually before we were writing Spider-Man, he's like, you need to read this book. It's everything you need to know. This is the absolutely everything you need to know about Marvel. So my son was like, take this, Dad. Use this.
You need to know what you're doing at your job. Here's a book.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, take this book. It's funny though. And this is something we could even talk about. As a creative, as a writer, a lot of times when you're working with massive lore like the Marvel Universe, it's very challenging to really understand all the minutia of that world. And unless you're like every day on a day-to-day getting into the weeds of it, you might not know, like, oh, this character did this and this storyline 10 years ago. I mean, it's a challenge. And I think, you know, books like this are a great thing. Wikis, obviously. There's a lot of stuff out there that can be looked into and read, you know, but really to get a mass, you know, kind of understanding of things, it's challenging.
So I've looked at, before this meeting, I was actually snooping on your LinkedIn to find out a little bit more about you. And I think you had briefly mentioned it, but you created like the largest comic book club or comic book, something in LA, right? I just barely, you know, like kind of skimmed through it. And I'm like, okay, you've done like a lot of things. You got your Chihuahua, you've got the projects you're doing with Taboo, you've got Marvel, the LA comic book club. I'm butchering it. Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
I thought so Comic Book Sunday is the name of the the group. And I also started a group called Jam Nation because I also play music, not professionally. It's more of a hobby, but you know, my big thing has always been about community building. And it's really funny to go and see this world of Web3 being like community. And, you know, but me, it was always community in the sense of like a need, right? Like I created Comic Book Sunday with my buddy, Jim Kruger. And Jim is a big comic book writer. And at the time I was not writing comics. I'd done a documentary on comics, but I was primarily working in film and TV. And I saw what was happening in the space where, you know, folks in film and TV were going, oh man, comics is the next big thing. We need to get in on it. And this is before Walking Dead. It's before all these things were happening, right? And I even was talking to Gail Ann Hurd, the producer of Walking Dead, and saying, we should take all of your old scripts off of the shelf and turn them into graphic novels because it's a great loss leader for marketing and getting ideas and stories out there. You've already spent all this money on it. Why are we not just taking these stories and putting them out into the world? You know, this is 2007. So again, a little bit ahead of the curve. But what happened was in 2008, I was like, you know what? I need to bring my friends together to connect my friends in film to my friends in comics. And was the beginning of Comic Book Sunday. It started with like 15 friends. One of my friends at the time, you know, he's still my friend, but at the time he was an assistant. Now he is the executive producer of The Witcher. Like you know, it's this like folks that were just starting out in their careers now are like running, you know, major franchises. Lucasfilm, you know, at the time was like associate producing on a YouTube series and working at a film company, and now is, you know, overseeing all of Lucasfilm intellectual property. And that's what started, you know, connecting folks in the comic book space, in the film space, in the animation space. This is a shirt from my buddies over at Titmouse Animation Studios, where I threw Comic Book Sunday for many years. But it started in a backyard. It started in my buddy Jim's backyard. And it grew to like 100 people just clogging his entire courtyard. And then I went to Titmouse. I was like, hey, I got this really cool community and party. Can we throw it in your parking lot? And Chris P was like, dude, yeah, let's throw the party. So I threw it there for many years, and you know, recently threw one about a year ago, last year at Titmouse, and I'm looking to get it back up again. I threw one about 2 months ago. I think we're going to do one in August, kind of slowly rebuild it. But again, instead of you know, how the first version was film and comics, what I want to do is like people in the creative space and connecting it to tech. So I've been throwing it at a virtual reality studio. A buddy of mine does VR and production and development. So yeah.
So do you find that, or could you say that you may attribute some of your success or a lot of your success to your community building, like bringing communities together, and that's kind of what attracts like some of the other stuff that you've been able to do or accomplish, people you meet?
100%, 100%. And that's why like the Web3 space is really interesting for me, because I've been doing this for like so long. And it's like something I looked at as a hobby that I was doing altruistically because I believed in my friends and wanted to see the right people connecting in the right ways. I never charged anyone anything. I think that's one of my biggest frustrations with NFTs, where I'm like, here you have this Bored Ape Yacht Club to get into for $200,000. And what I was doing at Comic Book Sunday afforded people real careers, real opportunities. Same with Jam Nation, real opportunities. The guys that I started, like my buddy I started with, I gave him an opportunity to score a film that I was working on, major film. It's on Hulu, and gave them a real career opportunity that now they're able to translate into real career money and real jobs and real, forward movement in their own stuff. So that's where one of my frustrations in the NFT space, where it's like, hey, you can come to a conference, you can do this, you can do that, but it's not always how do you, it's like you can be a part of a community, but unless there's someone really curating the meaningful connections and relationships, which is what I would do, and then I would bring in other mavens to kind of help facilitate that. That's always been my way, where I'll be like, okay, I'm going to bring in someone who is a pro in the space, like Jim Kruger. Jim, everyone knows is a comic book writer. Awesome. Jim and I, like, yo, let's do this party. That's producing. That's the producer in me. So now you have people that are in comics going, okay, it's legit. Like Jim Kruger is part of this community. Cool. Right. And then we grow from there. Then I bring in my friends in film. I go, all right, you're working over at Paramount. You're doing this. You're doing that. Come in. Let's start building this. We didn't need NFTs for this. This was like just grassroots community building. And we ended up San Diego Comic-Con 2010. I got a crazy story with that. So my buddy was like, yo, we should do a panel there. I'm like, do a panel for our comic book community? It's like, all right, cool. Let's just see what's up, right? And, mind you, like there's incredible people in this community. Marv Wolfman, who created Blade, Jonan Vasquez, creator of Invader Zim, Chris P., founder of Titmouse, like the who's who, Kevin Grievous, who created the film series Underworld. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let me put a panel together with all the homies. Let's throw this together. Let's see what happens. We got a panel. We got this huge room. And I'm like, I hope 20 people come. I hope that there's like at least some of my friends and family are there. So I go to the panel and I'm like nervous, right? And this is, I'm running to the panel. I'm late, like almost late to my own panel because I've been running around and just organizing things. I get there and there's this like short little line outside of our door. And I'm like, hey, I go up to the guy and I go, hey, we're here for the panel. And he's like, well, get in line. And I'm like, well, it's right here. He's like, no. It wraps all the way around. And I was like, whoa, wait a second, hold up. Our panel was standing room only. Like it was packed. Like everyone who, it was an incredible experience. And I was like, wow, we have a success here. Like this is a really incredible thing that was built, just from the grassroots, just an idea, and doing it every month and being consistent and just bringing in the right people and word of mouth. I mean, it was an incredible experience and it taught me so much. So yeah, absolutely. Like to your question, like that got me introduced to the folks at Titmouse, built my relationships. I'm now like with Titmouse, my buddy who was a producer at Titmouse now is head of development at Cartoon Network. That's how we got into Cartoon Network. Like, like it's the homie circle. And, again, where it was altruistic, it wasn't going out and trying to charge like people thousands of dollars to be a part of this exclusive community. It was, no, we're building this and the value is a meritocracy. That was always the vision of it. Yeah, I mean, that was even how I got to work with will.i.am. I mean, I went and met with Will and was like, yo, I got this really dope comic book creative community. And you want to make a comic book? I can call on anyone. If I don't know them, I know someone who does. That was how it worked.
You have a skill for connecting people, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
And that's where like tons of value is derived, is making these connections with other people, and not just for yourself, but saying, this person I know wants to meet this person. Let's put them together in a room or have a coffee or something and see what happens.
100%. That's what I do. Part of what I do. One of the many things I do. But it's producing. I mean, like in Hollywood, right? Producing is like this idea of making something that comes to fruition, right? Producing is in every facet of work, right? You can produce a product, you're a product, right? But you have an idea and you go, okay, cool, I want to make this. So let's just call that idea a script, right? So you've got this story or something you want to do. So you go find the right writer and you go, okay, this writer can write in this sort of genre or space, or they've done this before. So then I'll go and say, okay, now we've got this really great script. Okay, like who could bring this vision to life? Then you go and find the director. You say, okay, you're an incredible visionary director. You have great ideas. You've done it before, or we know you can do it. We trust you with this vision. You also have great actor relationships, right? Then we start figuring out, well, who are the actors that we want to put in the picture? So it's the same thing. And you start putting all these pieces together to build this machine that ultimately, at the end of the day, is a product that comes out to the world. I mean, producing is what we do. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't understand what a producer does in film and in Hollywood. And that's one of my many hats I wear. I mean, I'm also a writer, so I'm like a multi-talented. I don't always have to go and say, I need to find the writer. A lot of times, like, without getting into details, but we had a project where we were like, okay, this isn't working. So I came in and put on the writer hat and wrote it, you know, and that's what, you know, you have to have a lot of different skill sets. And if you don't have those skill sets as a writer or a director, I'm also a film editor. Like, I know how to get into the tech side of it. And, you know, so I'm one of these weird multi-talented, I guess, folks that have fingers in many pots. So I can do it and I can talk about it and I can envision it and then I can bring it to reality. Like,
You sound like an entrepreneur at heart. Like, when did this bug get in you where you started like your journey in entrepreneurship or community or even community building? I mean, it sounds like maybe that was part of what you were already doing, but
you know, I think a big part of it, like, I'll go back to when I was like 10 years old, man. Like 10 years old, I loved to throw parties and I just always loved bringing people together. So my mom was like, you have a knack. Like the day of, I remember, I think it was like my 10 or 11-year-old birthday party. And I was like, I want to throw a party. I called up everybody in my, you know, back in the day, right? Your phone book, and we had like a rotary phone. So called everybody up and said, yo guys, we're having a party at my house. I had like the whole class showed up and threw this fun water gun party, you know, and that was what I did even in high school. It was about bringing the right people together and then being able to jump from group to group, like where I could hang out with the kids playing Dungeons and Dragons. And then I could jump over to the kids that like were in the sports kind of popular crew and then jump over to the music kids because I also played music. And I wasn't like, and then finding the connective tissue, because it was like, all right, well, I might not be in the sports crowd because I'm not playing the sports, but my buddies that play music that are in the sports crew, that's the connective tissue. So that's how we connect all these dots. Like, I was doing this ever since I was a kid, man. But it was like, for me, it's like telling stories. Like, you're creating these worlds and you're telling these stories with all these people. They're all characters in the world. And the party you throw is, you know, it's part of it. So, you know.
Out of everything you do, between putting together these communities, these clubs, you know, Comic Book Sunday, writing for Marvel, doing NFT projects with, I think it was with Taboo, or maybe that was something else.
So Tab and I have an NFT project as well, because I'm also advising Sideshow Collectibles on their Web3 strategy, or as I call it, Web 2.5 strategy, because, you know, so we have a project that I just wrote up the press release for, and we'll be announcing that soon. So that has NFT component. It's got a physical component. I don't use the word phygital because that is a buzzword that means nothing. Physical and digital are two separate things. You cannot connect them. There's a reason why they exist differently, but the NFT can be the connective tissue between them. So anyway, I digress. So you were saying what?
So out of all the things that you do, what is the most fun? Like, what do you enjoy the most and jives with you the most with your personality?
Writing. I mean, writing is like, I'll be honest, writing for Marvel is like the dream come true, but it's also, writing comic books is one of the greatest fulfilling pleasures, because as a creative, you have all these ideas in your head, right? You have these stories you want to tell. So when you write a comic book, and if you understand the format and the medium, and you're able to work with folks that understand and work well with you, right? And are able to communicate, communication is key, right? You're able to see what's in your head on a page so quickly. Like, a film takes forever. You got to get your actors together. You got to get locations. You got to, you know, the money, of course, first, right? And then to getting into post-production. I mean, it's a long journey. I'm watching as I'm writing and turning in a script to our editor at Marvel. You know, Tab and I, you know, we do our jams, ideas, boom, boom, boom. I go into the lab. bang it out on my awesome old school looking keyboard. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Super rad keyboards. And I then watch it come to life. I mean, I get to see Peter Parker, you know, being chased through downtown Los Angeles, and it's written on the page. And then I watch Juan, the artist we're working with, bring it to life in ways that sometimes I'm like, dude, like like that's the dream, man. You can give someone something and then they are such an incredible artist. They elevate it to that next level and you're able to just go, that's it right there. Like, you know, that's it, man. I mean, storytelling is like all I love. Like that's the passion. So yeah. And I think, you know, for us as creatives and creators, it's like the ability to tell a story and get it to an audience as quickly as you, not as quickly, but in that sort of way where it doesn't start to get stale. Because as a writer, so often, and as a creative in general, like we're our own worst enemy. If you sit with something too long, like it's going to just get rotten in your head. And, you know, if there isn't a spark to it, if there isn't a real but that's the best thing about it too, right? The really great ideas never get rotten. They're the evergreens, right? So I have a ton of evergreens like in notebooks all over the place. I'm like, okay. And you go back to those and you go, that's one of them. Then you go through a bunch of others and you're like, okay, garbage, right? So it's that feeling of like finding those stories that you really connect to. And that's also the challenge when you're working on deadlines and working with a company like Marvel, where you're like, well, we got to turn it around. Like, you gotta love the story. You gotta find something you care about, because that's going to print. That's going to be on shelves in Barnes and Noble. And, you know, yeah, man, like you better love it. Like not you, but like you, and like as the creator, like me, I better love what I'm making, because otherwise it's sitting there and staring me in the face going, oh man, like I wish I had, you know?
Well, there's some people that would be listening to this or seeing it, they're probably just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this guy writes for Marvel and he's got these other cool projects working with people that are just at the top of their game. What kind of advice would you give to people that would attempt things but maybe fail?
Keep failing. I mean, that's my biggest advice. Dude, I mean, you know, and this is what people say, entrepreneur, you know, or thought leaders, or fail. But like, what is a failure, right? I just did a post on LinkedIn. I don't know if you saw it. It was, you know, just got back from Comic-Con. So this will date this video. It won't be evergreen. I just got back from Comic-Con. But, you know, what I wrote in that post was about when we did our documentary. Like I did a documentary on comic books in 2001, 2002. It was not financial. I didn't make a dime on it. It wouldn't be considered a commercial success in any way, because you can only watch it on Vimeo right now. We didn't get the distribution that we had hoped for or wanted. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, that film was a failure in the sense of monetary, was a failure in the sense that like, you've never seen it. You might have, if you watched a PBS documentary called Superheroes, you might have seen my interview I shot with Frank Miller, because they used that. But like, that's the biggest distribution that got. That said, if I hadn't done that documentary and failed in the sense of like what you would consider a success for a film, I never would have gone to Comic-Con. I never would have met Jim Kruger. I would have moved to LA, but I might not have moved in the same exact way or the same time frame, which would have meant that I never would have probably started Comic Book Sunday in the way that it did. So you look at like the trajectory of all of your failures, right? All of the blood on the trail, so to speak. Every one of those is a success. I think the only thing you can do is just get up and do it and get better at it. Like I'm writing for Marvel, and you know, it's one of those dream come trues, but like it took a long time to just be able to get even the ability to tell stories in a way that I still like. When anyone says they're an expert, I hesitate, you know. I mean, I would say my uncle, who is a professor in linguistics, like he's an expert in his field. He's been doing it for 60 plus years, like those are the experts that have been, but even so, like even as experts, we're always learning, we're always growing. We have to always be open to change. And I think that's where this space is really interesting, because, you have these folks coming in and saying they're experts. And it's like, well, it's a baby space, it's nascent. Maybe you're an expert in the field that you are working in. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, what is an expert? But at the same time, as an artist, as a creative, you just have to get up out of bed and create. Like, that's it. That's the biggest advice I can give to anyone. Like, if you're a writer, just write. If you're an artist, go paint, doodle, draw, whatever it is, like play your music and go meet people. Like, that's the biggest thing. Go meet people and talk to people. And I think the other biggest piece of advice, know what you want, because you never know when you're going to meet the right person that could help you on that journey. And you can say, hey, I really want to be X. I really want to do this. And if that person goes, well, you know what? I know so-and-so. That's the first step. Like, that's the biggest first step. And I think, I always say it's follow the rabbit, man. Like Alice in Wonderland, follow the rabbit. It was a Matrix, but it's true. Like, you never know where it's going to lead you. But if you don't get up and do it, then, you're never going to get anywhere.
I got a fun fire round question for you. It's really a yes or no, but do you have ADHD?
Probably. I've never been like officially diagnosed with it, but like, I think it's honestly a superpower. I think what people consider like these like disabilities, what is a disability? Like, why is it a disability? I think if we look at something and we're able to learn how to use it as a power, and we appreciate it and engage it as a power, man, I mean, yeah, I got a million tabs open in my head, and I'm always looking at how do I connect all the nodes, And I think that's where the power comes from. Because if we look at it as like, oh, I'm getting distracted. Oh, I need to pull myself back over here. No, follow the rabbit, man. Let the rabbit take you where you need to go. And you never know, because you think that you need to go here, but you really might need to go here in order to understand over here better. So that's my superpower, man.
I like it. I'll sum it up because I'm about to end this call, but summing up some of the advice is keep failing, because therein you're going to find success. For writers that write, just write, get out of bed and write or paint, meet people and follow the rabbit, because that's where it's going to lead to your passion, basically.
100%, man.
You can love it, man. Let's do this again later.
Absolutely. All right, brother. Take care, Ryan. Good talk.